Hello, welcome back to everyone that's tuned in to the American Ultra Stock channel. Thank you so much for being here. You see it on my background, and you see on Braden's background, alluding to the best player on the pitch wearing a USMNT kit today. At least it's the Olympics. Unfortunately, we just had the friendly, trying to get this out as soon as we can. The US lost in Kansas City to Japan 2-0. And we didn't get that little silver lining that some of you guys in the comments has said that you wish that this Olympic side would do. It was a bit of a mixed lineup, not really what I think we're going to field in Paris, but your initial thoughts straight after that disaster class that we had today, Braden.
Yeah, I think the first thing that stuck out to me, even before the game started, was the lineup. The lack of Aidan Morris and Gianluca Busio, Morris being in England to finalize his transfer to Middlesbrough, and Busio still carrying a bit of an injury from Venezia's promotion playoff final second leg, where he did get the assist on the leading goal. I think that was a huge impact because we saw a very mixed lineup, I think it's fair to say, and some interesting personnel choices in there for Mitrovic that I think if you look at just the players he selected, I think there's a lot of players that I would have picked differently, but there's no point talking about that, I think, right now. If you look at the players he did select, I think it would have fit a 4-4-2 better. Instead, you have Johan Gomez playing in the midfield alongside Taylor Booth and Tanner Tessman, which it's not anything against Booth as a player, but you're leaving Tessman alone by himself, whereas normally he would have Aidan Morris next to him to help anchor the midfield. And as a result, I think the midfield was very open. Booth himself didn't get the ball too much, especially in the first half, and Gomez, whenever he did get the ball, lost it immediately. So in terms of personnel, a 4-4-2 would have made more sense, and we've really only seen Mitrovic try the 4-3-3. He went with it again, but with players out of position, it clearly didn't work. At halftime, he made the right decision, bringing on 3 subs, and I thought they improved the game quite significantly, but ultimately we were still second best. There was at least some attacking threats in the second half by the likes of Paxton Aronson, Jack McGlynn, Griffin Yao. There was one good chance where Paxton crossed it in very early in the half, but Maguire's layoff to McGlynn just wasn't good enough. Cowell had one nice run after he came in, and then Booth probably should have played him the ball back, but didn't. And it just seemed like every time there was a spark of creativity from anyone, whether it was a winger, a striker, someone in the midfield, it was always let down by the person they passed the ball to. And ultimately, there were no clear-cut chances, which I think was a really unfortunate thing, and not how you want to go into Paris, as this is the last friendly before the Olympics. And Mitrovic did say he's going to be putting together his ideal Olympic roster tonight, immediately after the game. And then after that, he'll go to the clubs, ask for players to see if they'll be released. If not, he'll go back into the depth chart and try to find more players. But the decisions are going to be made very quickly, which is smart because it's a big ask for some of these clubs to release their players, and they're going to want to know in as much advance as possible who's going to be available. But I think, honestly, and this is not a good sign at all, this game left more questions than answers.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I just want to stress this to perhaps some people that saw this group for the very first time. Be hopeful. Don't hang on to this game and say that we're hopeless going into. I know it's a very pessimistic time to be a USMNT fan, and honestly, soccer is in its entirety here in the country. It's not really at the best moment. But I will say we had a very, very capable showing against France, and these are my initial thoughts, how much we missed our ideal lineup, and even tactically, not only on the personnel, but also the way that we played well, which is affected because of the personnel that you select. But on paper, we were playing a formation, and on the pitch, we weren't. We had one midfielder. That's it. And that's not only going forward, that's also progressing the ball from the back. Booth didn't really do a good job of presenting himself as an opportunity, and when Johan Gomez did that, well, he's Johan Gomez. He's not a midfielder, so it didn't really work. So my initial thoughts are, please, guys, stay hopeful, because I think that we showed against a better opponent in France that with a 3-man midfield that I think it's going to be fielded out, or even with McGlynn coming in for one of them, we can actually hang on to these against these teams. So again, we're going to have another center back that's overage. We're going to have a different striker. So my initial thoughts are, please keep the hope, but it was a disaster. I think it's fair to say. And now moving on to the next topic, Braden, You said that the decisions are going to be made. They're going to be calling players to release. Apparently, the last camp they had consulted, and I would imagine that they're keeping up to tabs and letting the clubs know to have some idea of who would be released or not. Now, today was an opportunity for a lot of players to try to show up there. Like you said in the preview, half of the roster was fighting for a spot. We had the closed doors friendly, which I'm going to assume that was dedicated to the fringe players, and we lost. And this one, same score line. Now, out of the guys that played today, which ones impressed you and which ones did not impress you at all? Which would be the answers, in your opinion, to your own question?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's going to be the one that's surrounding this team until the roster is announced. I'll start at the very back. Patrick Schulte in goal. I obviously he's a lock for the roster. Him and Slonina are the two goalkeepers. Brady will probably be called upon as the alternate, the third one, as one of the four alternates that travels with the squad. Can't see Chicago Fire releasing him for that role in any world, so they'll go even deeper down the depth chart, probably bring someone who doesn't really have a future for that spot. But in terms of his starting job, I think this was really Schulte's audition. I think he's been leading the way for the #1 spot the whole time, and this was his final audition to Mitrovic and the coaching staff for having the starting job in Paris, and he did not look great. His distribution was very poor, although I will say sometimes the center backs put him in bad positions by passing it back to him in dangerous places, but I can't really pinpoint a single pass that he had that was a good ball, especially long. He had a couple like decent ones short, but any keeper should do that. And it seemed like every time he played the long ball, it was a turnover, which is not something you want to see. And the second goal in particular was a horrible mistake. Yes, you can argue there was a deflection, but you absolutely have to be doing better there. And I'm sure if you ask Schulte himself, he's going to be very disappointed. He's going to want that one back. So I think Slonina may have just done enough by not even playing to overtake the #1 spot. Overall, I'm not concerned about the goalkeeper spot. There's other positional questions that are a little bit more concerning, but I don't think Schulte did himself any favors with this game. In terms of the center backs, I was very surprised to see Jonathan Tomkinson start over Jalen Neal, especially since this was Neal's first camp with this group since returning from a long-term injury. Maybe that indicates that Mitrovic doesn't see him as part of the final roster, because you would think maybe he got minutes in the closed doors friendly, but this one obviously meant a lot more, being broadcasted to everybody on YouTube and on Universo. I think the fact that we didn't see him in any capacity, not even coming on as a sub. Now, granted, we were losing, so we had to make attacking changes. But I think that could indicate that maybe he's lower down in the depth chart, which is a shame, because I rate Neal right now and for his future so much higher than Jonathan Tomkinson. I thought Tomkinson had a horrible game on that right-hand side alongside Reynolds, who I thought was the worst player on the pitch for us in the first half before, thankfully, he came off at halftime. I don't know why Tomkinson is even on this roster. Hopefully Dietz comes in over him once he comes back from injury. But yeah, and Zimmerman wasn't great either. He had a yellow card that I think would have been a red in a competitive game, since it was a friendly and it's the final preparation. Teams want to see 11v11. The ref decided to let it slide, give him a yellow, which ultimately I think was the right call for the situation. But make no mistake about it, if he makes that kind of last-ditch challenge in Paris, he'll be sent off. So not an encouraging sign from someone who is supposed to, as the overage player, the only one with this group, bring the experience and the quality to the team. He didn't really show that for me. I think Neal really deserves some minutes, and it's a shame that he didn't get any. The fullbacks in the first half were very poor. I already said Reynolds, I thought, was the worst player on the pitch. Got burned time and time again. Also had that handball for a penalty very early on in the game that completely changed the way the game went. I mean, if it was still 0-0, 10-15 minutes into the game, it's a completely different scenario than being down 1-0. Caleb Wiley wasn't great either. I thought Tolkien was a lot better once he came in, and Harriel had a couple of shaky moments, but I think overall, both going forward and defending, he was a lot better than Reynolds. Maybe that means he starts, but who knows? You have to make the final roster first. I think Tolkien, Wiley, and Harriel, only two of them are going to make the final cut for the roster, so they were ultimately playing for their spots. If we're going based on today, I would take Tolkien and Harriel. In the midfield, I already mentioned it, it was a complete disaster. Tanner Testament was left on his own, and it's no fault of his own. He definitely did not have his best game, but again, when he has no one to help him, he has to sit right in front of the center backs. There's nothing he can really do in that situation. So it's going to be a lot better whether we have Morris or Busio to partner him, or maybe even McGlynn. I think it would be a lot better. Johan Gomez, I can't see a world where he makes the final roster after that performance. He's been with a striker group the entire cycle, comes into the midfield as an 8-10 kind of hybrid, him and Taylor Booth alternating. I don't think he did himself any favors. It's kind of a shame that we didn't see Damian Downs in any capacity, not in the midfield at all. That would have been a disaster too. But the fact that he was in this group like Neil for the first time and didn't get any minutes, I think was a bit of a shame, because Duncan Maguire up top was very quiet. And the one real opportunity he had, he messed up the layoff to McGlynn. And Taylor Booth, I still think he has a good chance of making the final roster, but I think he was a little absent outside of one good run towards the end of the first half that he had. Played a through ball to Yao. Ultimately, the Japanese keeper made a very good stop to deny Yao from a goal-scoring opportunity. But I think I would have liked to see Booth more in that role. And that brings me to the forwards, where Paxton Aronson on the right wing, like you said, I think he was our best player on the pitch, although it wasn't a high bar. No one really had that great of a performance. It would have been nice to see him play more of a 10 role instead of Booth, maybe swap their positions, especially since that's how they've been playing for club. Paxton's been in the middle as an 8, as a 10, and Booth has been playing more of a right wing role for Utrecht. So I think that would have been nice to see. And due to the problems that he was causing on the wing, I think he would have provided a much needed spark in the midfield. So we'll see what Mitrovic does for the final roster. Griffin Yao, I thought, again, for his standards, not the best game, but he was dangerous. He had that good run through where he almost got it by the Japanese keeper. Again, very good stop, and had a couple of dangerous opportunities in the second half as well. I think he's a lock for the roster regardless. And then off the bench, I think the subs overall made a much bigger impact. McGlynn, once he came on, was good as always. You're never going to see a bad Jack McGlynn game. His long balls, as always, were on point. He had one very nice one, turning the opposite way. Did a kind of 360. Found, I think it was John Tolkien on the left-hand side to get it out of danger. And he had several passes like that. It absolutely is needed, especially since, and we'll make a final prediction video for the final roster closer to when it comes out. I have a sneaking suspicion Aidan Morris won't be there. So having someone like Busio or McGlynn in the midfield is crucial. Having someone who can sit a little bit deeper than players like Taylor Booth, like Johan Gomez. Kramaski did nothing off the bench. I don't think he makes the final roster. I already mentioned the two fullbacks were better. Cade Cowell had one electric run that Taylor Booth let him down on in the final pass. He messed up the 1-2. But ultimately, he came on as a striker, which hasn't been his role in the past, and I think might indicate maybe he doesn't have a place in the final roster. So that's my thought on all the players who played. I think, unfortunately, most of the players who didn't play, besides Paredes, who I think may have had a slight knock, and then obviously Busio and Morris, who had their own issues. I think besides that, all the players who didn't play, with, again, the obvious exception of Slonina in goal, their chances of making the final roster are also slim to none.
Yeah, I would just say I think that Cowell is a valuable asset, especially after that performance. I don't think that he's a great player by any means, but the physicality and the impact and how direct he is, like against France, it can pay off, especially at this level. The athleticism, I think it'll pay off. My take is Johan Gomez shouldn't be anywhere near this roster, but I think he will. I think he will make the final roster. But honestly, I think that there's a slight chance that he makes it as an alternate. I don't think he'll make it as a final one, but I think he will be there as an alternate. For some reason, I think Dimitrovic really rates him, always gives him minutes, and I hope that that's not the case. I sincerely hope not. And I think that it's really important for Mitrovic to be a little bit, I think it's the first time I see him as very tactically inept, because he should have seen that it wasn't working during the first half. And we see it time and time again, managers making slight tweaks here and there, especially when you have players that can play two positions. If you just swap Paxton with Booth, I think it would have been better. I was really disappointed with Booth's performance in the first half. He had that one good run, which was phenomenal, especially the weight of the pass was really good. But whenever Tessman or Tompkinson or Zimmerman had the ball, or even Reynolds, Booth would always run away. And even when Paxton had the ball sometimes on the wing, Booth would shy away behind his marker. And I think that he had a little bit of a spark in the second half, but ultimately nothing clicked today. I think it was a horrible performance. Hopefully we can shake this off. And I think that even the intensity throughout the match from Japan as well, I thought it was very low. It was less than I expected. I don't know if these players have I know this was something that in Brazil they always say, in the final preparations before the Olympics, everyone's scared of getting injured. I don't know if that's the case. I hope that I'm trying to just find a silver lining right here. But it is what it is. This was the last preparation we could have. I don't know if they will have some sort of closed doors things in Paris, but he is going to make the decision on the roster. So this was really relevant. And based on what we've seen throughout this entire journey, throughout this cycle, Braden, what do you think are the odds of the U.S. Getting a medal this summer?
Well, if you asked me that question before the match, I would have been very hopeful, especially after the performance we had against France in France. I thought it showed a lot about the team that they went into France, and especially being down 2-0, came back, drew 2-2 in a hostile environment. I thought that showed a lot of character, and it showed that Mitrovic, with his team talks, he can really motivate a team. But after today, I don't know. Maybe it's like you said, players were just afraid of getting injured. It's the final preparations. You want to do whatever it takes to be on that plane, but it didn't seem like the players did that today, unfortunately. And to be completely honest, my hopes of getting a medal have gone down drastically, especially seeing that this Japanese side, who I don't know the exact pathway, I don't know when we might potentially come up against them in the knockouts, but I think they're better than us. I think Spain's better than us. I think Argentina has a shot at being better than us. I think although we did draw France, they're definitely a better team on paper, and especially if they do bring some of the overage players that they have, like Lacazette, for example. I think he could immediately come in and be the best striker in the entire camp, if he gets released, which there's a very large chance that he doesn't. But you could also say the same thing about a lot of our players that are based in Europe. And even the ones in MLS. League Cup will be going on. There's going to be games for the domestic players, and there's going to be preseason for the abroad players. So it's going to be a big challenge getting all of the best players released. So ultimately, I'm not going into this with hope, because I've gone into the last couple of games for both the senior team and the Olympic team with hope, and every time I've left disappointed. So until then, no more hope until I get proven wrong.
Yeah, I'm gonna disagree right here. I'm gonna stick by these guys. I think that there is still, we can have a very done some simulation. I think that there is a scenario where we have a somewhat favorable path, and I think that if every team that I think is the best in each group tops it, and we get second and somehow don't play Argentina right away, I think that we could have a favorable path. And honestly, I'm still hopeful that we're going to get a medal. I know that it sounds crazy, but I'm going to back these guys. I think that they've been in the trenches before in tougher games, and I think that the quality plus the very much needed additions that we're going to have over age, which I think is the key, I think that we can look a lot better during the summer. So let us know down below in the comments if you've watched the game, what you thought about the game. What are your hopes of the Olympics? Are you with me thinking that we should stick by them and have some hope, or are you falling into what's probably the realistic option right now, which Braden's more leaning towards? Let us know in the comments below what you thought. Any players that somehow impressed you, any players that you missed. I think that the Diego Luna snub looks worse than ever after this game. But thank you so much. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and share with your friends. We'll see you next time.